Hi, and welcome to One Little Candle, a place where genuine believers are encouraged, empowered, and inspired to be the light that God calls us to be by contending for the faith that God has entrusted once for all time to His people so that we may pass down undefiled the truth of God's infallible word to the next generation. And in case you're thinking that you can't make a difference in your own little corner of the world, yes, you can, because all it takes is one little candle. I'm your host, Rebecca Berschwinger. Thanks for joining me for today's episode. Parents, there has been a war declared on your children, and it shows no signs of letting up. Lies are being taught that directly violate God's created order. And these lies are being aimed at children at younger and younger ages. Because of this, it's imperative that parents begin at a young age to instill a godly perspective about gender and God's design for marriage in their children because, it's much easier to instill God's truth from the start than to try to undo the lies that they have been told. So get to your children first with God's truth about marriage and gender before the world gets to them with the lies. You can do this by reading them faith-based ebooks from Love and Truth Books. Love and Truth books are a powerful tool in helping parents and grandparents to firmly entrench in the hearts of children God's design for marriage and gender. Empower your children to be able to identify the lies by screening them through a biblical lens today. Visit www.loveandtruthbooks.com for access to free resources for you and your child, because what you teach them today will have a lasting impact tomorrow. Well, hi, and how are you today? I hope in your corner of the world that all is well. If you are returning, thank you so much for joining me again. And if you are new to One Little Candle podcast, welcome, my friend. I am so very happy to have you here, and I hope that you too will return. So it's been quite a while since I've done so, but I have a very special guest today, and I'm very excited to share her with you. Her name is Hannah Pierrou. A little bit about Hannah. She is a wife to a Marine. She's a homeschool mom of 3. She's also an author, illustrator, and the creator and host of the Treehouse Storyteller podcast. She is also a longtime lifestyle photographer, and her work is beautiful. So, Hannah describes herself as a wannabe homesteader with miniature donkeys, goats, and chickens. But her biggest passion is equipping fellow mamas with tools and resources that provide them with the courage to parent their kids in today's sideways culture. And boy, she's right about that sideways culture. So, yeah, that's a little bit about Hannah Pierrou. I love this girl. She's a sweetheart. She's a lot of fun to be with. And she really does have a heart, not just for mamas, she's got a heart for people. She has a heart for God. She's someone that I certainly enjoy listening to. And I'm pretty sure that you're going to enjoy listening to her just as much as I do. So, that being said, here we go. My interview with Hannah Pierrou of the Treehouse Storyteller podcast. Hi, Hannah. Welcome to One Little Candle.
Rebecca, thank you so much for having me. I am thrilled to be talking to you again.
Me too. Me too. For those of you listening, I'm sure who listen to me regularly, this name is familiar. Hannah has been mentioned a few times. And if you remember right, I shared with you how I just recently was a guest on her podcast, The Treehouse Storyteller. So as Hannah and I were praying before starting this, we were just, praying about the technology and thanking God for the technology. I'm here in upstate New York, and we're able to come together and do something like this. And so it's just a huge privilege to do it. And so how Hannah and I first, quote unquote, met was I received a wonderful email from her. Oh my goodness, probably a year and a half ago, maybe. I think it's been over a year. Just
Yeah, it's been a
encouraging,
while.
Yeah, she was encouraging me in my podcast. She had been following me on Instagram, but she also listened to one of my episodes. It was the episode about taking back the rainbow, and so she just sent me an email thanking me and encouraging me, and then, telling me how she would one day soon be starting her own podcast and that, perhaps we could collaborate. So here we are. So glad that we met. But anyway, so Hannah, I think the first thing I wanna talk about is because if I'm correct, you kinda call yourself a homesteader, right? You guys
I'm
have a
I'm kind
farm.
of a wannabe homesteader. Not
Okay.
I don't think a true homesteader would they would probably call me a poser. Um, but I I try my darnest. We have chickens, we have goats, we have 2 donkeys, I've got a garden and a greenhouse. We live at high altitude. We're at 7,500 not square feet, 7,500 feet above sea level. Let me try that
Wow,
again 5
okay.
times fast. Um, and it turns out that everything likes oxygen to grow. And so we're a little thin up here. So mountain gardening is definitely something I'm still trying to get my handle on. It's taken a long time. And things like water. And up until this year, we were in a very, very serious drought and, lots of fire danger and everything. But we have had a ton of rainfall this year. So my garden is I don't know, it might come around this year, we'll see, but yes, I try my best. It is honestly just truly a hobby for me that brings blessing to my life and joy to attempt, but I have made, very little income off of it. We sell our eggs, at times we sell some baby goats. We have 3 babies right now that we're getting ready to offload, but anyway, so it's a very, very minimal from, like, the homesteader, really making a career sort of lifestyle, but it's fun. It's really fun, and it teaches me so much about growth, about life, about God's word. I mean, he uses farming and agriculture in so much of his word. So I love that aspect about it.
That's a good point, and I'm sure your children are learning a lot too, right? Because 'Cause you've got
Yes.
little ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, c how old are they?
So Elijah will be 13 in August, so he's at the end of 12,
Oh,
and
boy.
Elsa is 10. I know, I'm like, "I'm gonna have a teenager." Elsa is 10. I think she is already a teenager at heart, and Aaliyah is 4. Um,
Wow.
she's right along there with Elsa. I mean, she thinks she runs the world and, a little girl, so
Yeah, little girls especially. Yeah, I have a six-year-old granddaughter like that. As a matter of fact, she
Mm.
just left here a couple hours ago. She had some Nana time yesterday, and,
Aw, I love it.
so she spent the night with Nana and Papa. But, yeah, your kids, I'm sure, are learning a lot through this
Mhm,
farming too as
mhm.
well, so well, I know the pictures you share, your goats are adorable, your donkeys are
Thank
adorable,
you.
and your kids are adorable, but I look at some of these things and I think she has got to have her hands so full. Just the kids alone, but then when you throw a farm into the mix and then a podcast and then the other things we'll talk about that you do, wow, Hannah.
Mhm.
So, a
I
busy
hear
woman.
that a lot, in my response to people. Well, I have a cheeky response and a realistic response. My cheeky one is that it's easier if you're I've never actually been a waitress, but you watch them, if you have just a glass on a tray, you're unbalanced, but if you have a lot of things and multiple things and your plate's full, it's more
Hmm,
balanced. That's my cheeky answer of like, a full plate balance is better than a giant potato on one side. But, in reality, God gives seasons for things for me. And so, I'm not doing everything all at once all the time. And I think that's the misconception for, a lot of us that, just because we have our hands in different things that it's constantly all the time and it's not sustainable. And I've had seasons where I've tried to do that and it falls apart. So it really is, pushing hard into one of those sectors of my life really hard. And obviously, I have to keep everything alive on a daily basis, all the heartbeats that are surrounded me. But in reality, the workload it varies from day to day of what I actually focus on.
yeah, well, that's good, and you have your hubby there too, so,
Yeah.
right, to help. So that's a little bit about your farm and your family. Now your writing blows me away, okay? I
Oh,
wanna
thank
move on to
you.
this here because
Oh my
and
goodness.
I think I told you the other day,
Mhm,
I really think you should put together your Instagram posts and things like that because they are very profound.
mhm.
You have the gift of being able to say a lot in few words. I still struggle with that as a devotional writer. You know, I write for Fruits of Faith Ministry regularly, and I'm only allowed 300 words. That's hard.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
struggle with that, but no, your writing is wonderful.
Oh, thank you,
And we'll
Rebecca.
talk about your book in a minute. And you're quite creative in many other ways because you are also a photographer
Mhm.
and an artist. Is it are you just do you just illustrate children's books or both? Mostly children's, right?
So far, just children's books, yep.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, but you're a wonderful illustrator too.
Oh,
So
thank you.
I have a daughter-in-law who's a photographer and you and her remind me of each other.
Mm,
You have very much the same interests in that. But yeah, so you're a photographer, so you do have a business as well for that.
yes.
But talk about your book. I wanna talk about your book From Farm to Film because the title alone, for me, really piqued my interest when I first saw the title. I was like, "What could that possibly be about from farm to film?" Right?
Uh-huh.
So tell us a little bit about that.
Alright, so I actually have one right here. I'll hold it up in case it does go into video format, but so
Yeah.
this is, farm to film, it's probably backwards on the video, but an alphabetical adventure told through the eyes of an old lens, and there's uh, several inspirations that kinda this came from, and first and foremost, um, with the title, Farm to Film, to kinda answer your curiosity, and you have one in the mail as of
I
yesterday.
can't wait. I know. That's my shower gift for grandchild number
Oh,
7.
yay.
Yes.
Yay, yay,
Yes.
yay. So Farm to Film is kind of a play on farm to table, which was like, a really trendy language that came about, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago. And so this was written uh, really kind of in that time period, maybe a little bit later on. And so Farm to Film is taking that concept, but applying it to film, as in our old film of a camera before the digital era of photography existed. And so my original love for photography came from film. And while I didn't have a giant amount of time exposing film and doing it, developing it all myself, I still really love the heart behind that. And I
Hmm.
swear I just cannot get a camera still to this day that beats my Canon 35 millimeter. Like it doesn't matter to me. I'm like, those pictures that I took back with film are incredible. And so my heart with this is having a little girl going to her grandpa's farm, picking up his really old, like earlier 1900s film camera. I mean, just super old. Um, and walking through, it's the kind that you look down into to see. Instead of you're looking
Yeah.
behind the camera, this is you're looking down into the camera. And uh, so it's a change of perspective and a shift that I want to give parents and kids, just a tool to think of how they're looking at the world around them differently, and to really notice all of life. And what we have experienced having a small little farm, and what my kids have experienced, what I've experienced of just noticing every single tiny little detail. And I think those things are so significant, and God wants us to notice those things. And this book in and of itself isn't overtly Christian. It doesn't have, I've had some criticism. It doesn't have the Bible in it. It doesn't have Jesus in it. And I'm like, but it's something that I can give to the whole world,
Mhm.
really without offense, and if they can notice more about creation on a daily basis, then perhaps God can use that as a tool to show himself. And we know we're without excuse with creation, that if anyone who sees creation will know there's a creator, knows that there's something bigger. And so we have so many distractions in our daily life with screens and
Mhm.
technology, and
Yes.
so much right in front of our nose, that we are missing all of these grand things that are like teeny tiny little details, but are big, big things that God has created and just miracles in and of themselves. And so that's kind of like, when you really hear my heart about the book, that's what I pray over it. And when I hand it to someone that I don't know where they stand with the Lord, like that is what I am like. I was at an event this past weekend, and I got to meet, hundreds and hundreds of people came into my booth, and I signed a ton of books to little kids and really got to share that heart behind it with many people. But then there's those people that walk in that you're like, I know you're I know you're not fully getting this, but I'm going to hand this to you and you're going to buy it, and I'm going to pray that you find the Lord through this kind of concept of just slowing down and noticing what's around you.
Wow, okay. Well said.
More than what you
Well said,
thought
and
I
I
was
t
going to say.
no, I know, but I totally agree. Thank you for that,
Hmm.
seriously. Totally agree with you on that one. So
Probably over 300 words.
right? Well, and the funny thing is we started out talking about it being the title being a take on Farm to Table, and when I first back a while back, when I first heard of your book and I was searching for it again, I was looking for Farm to Table,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I was like, "There's no Farm to Table by Hannah Pierrou." And then I found I was like, "Oh, you idiot, it's Farm to Film." So, but anyway, you have any more books coming
Yeah,
or
so I have a coloring book that takes all of my illustrations of farm to film and turns it into line drawings so that I, can pass that on to whoever and they can make my illustrations their own, which kids love to do that. It's been a huge hit. But my other book that I've been working on that I am just, you can be praying with me for
Mm,
this. It has been seen by many publishers. I've gotten a big no from a lot of people. This one is more, you could say, controversial.
that's why you've gotten the big
Yes,
no.
the heart
Mhm,
behind it is certainly not offensive,
mhm.
uh, but at the same time, people keep reminding me that Jesus offended people everywhere he went. And so this book specifically, I won't give all the titles and details, but this book
Mhm.
specifically is reclaiming the rainbow. At back to God's promise, back to God's intention, God's heart for the colors that he put in the sky. And so it goes a little bit through, your Noah journey, and goes a little really a unique perspective and kind of
Mhm.
creative way that I portray the rainbow. It's actually personified as a female character. And
Okay.
and so she goes through really just recounting ways that maybe she's been forgotten about, and that this
Huh,
is
huh.
really this is really who God created me to be. And it's told by it's not from her person, so it's told by third person talking about her. So
Wow.
it's really fun. I've gotten to, just really start to feel very proud, even though I don't have any actual book deal or anything. I'm just really starting to feel a peace with the Lord of like, yes, this is getting really, really close. This is getting, where you want it to be. And I'm really excited about it, whether I end up self publishing again or whether it gets picked up. Either way, I think it's one of those books that needs to be on the shelf. There's so many, if you Google rainbow books, it's scary. It's a very scary world
Yeah.
in
Yes.
that genre, and you don't find anything like this book. You find books about the woke agenda, books about the pride flag, as you are well aware. You find books on every single other topic than what God's promise is for the rainbow and his
Yeah.
covenant.
Yeah. Unfortunately, you do. You're right. But I love so you personified the rainbow. I love the way you think, Hannah. I I I can't wait to feast my eyes on this book.
Oh,
So thank you for sharing that with us. Thank you. So
absolutely.
well, you probably kinda just answered a little bit about one of the questions I had for you, and that is your passion. What fuels you? In other words, what is it that's happening in our world or our culture that really adds fuel to that fire that's within you?
Yeah, yeah. Well, just seeing, I mean, I have people close to home that have been overtaken by kind of our, really just the enemy, but you can bottle that up and label it the woke agenda.
Mhm.
But um, really just the way that I've seen our with my own kids. I mean, we public schooled for a few years in the middle. We started out homeschool. I started to have doubts. My husband wasn't fully on board at the time. We were, kind of maxed out. The kids were younger, things were harder, different season of life.
Yeah.
And I started to really question my ability to raising my kids at home and homeschooling them. And so putting them back in school um, seemed right and felt right for a little bit. And then the more really 2020 exposed a lot. And I think that's the story for a
Mm.
lot of people that I talk to, where you start to have these video, your kids are doing school over, Zoom or video school. And you're like, wait, what did the teacher just say? Like, that's not even at all based on true evidence. Like, why? Like, it was I don't even remember any of the specifics, but my husband and I were sitting in the same room and looking at each other going, "This is not okay. This is what we're sending our kids to.
Mhm.
If they're saying this on Zoom, what is being said behind closed doors?" And so all of the sudden now I have my husband's buy-in, his support. He's like, "No, Hannah, we're pulling them. Like, done deal. You have my support this time. Like, it's an easy decision." And we've not looked back. And so to answer your
Good.
question, so education, the education system we have seen, completely fail our values. Now, it might be perfectly great for someone someone with non-biblical, non-Christian values, but for us, like, nope, that's a fail. And our just the way that these agendas are being pushed through our capitalism, like through our large industry of any corporation you go to, you feel like, at least I'm convicted that I can't give my money to a lot of places right now.
Mhm.
And so it's there's so much going on between that, or just, I mean, that's not even tapping into entertainment, like, things
Mhm.
Disney is pushing out, whatever it is. There's
Mhm.
everywhere you look, there is a perfect distraction, the enemy's hand at play.
Yeah.
And we can't put our kids in a bubble. We can't shield them from everything, but we can equip them. We can raise them up in truth. We can shelter them from things at a time where it's necessary, at an age where they don't need to be seeing all of these things. But then we also, honestly, like, our kids are probably less sheltered than most public school because we talk to our kids about a lot of really hard in the news topics.
Mhm.
Things come up and we talk about it, or they hear Cody and I talking about it, and then they're like, "Well, wait, what's going on?" And they're intrigued, and they're very interested. Especially my older two are very interested in hearing about politics and hearing about, world issues. And I can see them going into something one day where they're really being a voice. I don't know what that will look like, but I know, God is really stirring their heart and setting that foundation for them.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, well, they look at the example they have, right?
Mhm.
You and your husband and their uncle. So,
Yes, yes.
yeah, obviously your heart is for families, it's for parents, it's for children in fighting a godless culture. That's what I'm hearing.
Mhm.
Really, right, equipping
Yeah.
especially equipping parents. Um, because yeah, with the public schools, and you're right, the pandemic, that's one of the ways in which it was a gift.
Yeah.
There's a lot of ways, and I did an episode about that a while back, a podcast episode, that the pandemic, it was an unopened gift in
Mm.
many ways, unfortunately, but it was a gift.
Yeah.
It gave us a lot of time to pull back and maybe, rethink things,
Mhm.
get a perspective. And as for parents like you had a window into what was going on in your child's classroom,
Yeah.
and it wasn't good for many people, unfortunately. So yeah. So your podcast now, you've got your podcast, the Treehouse Storyteller. What made you decide to start that?
Well, I didn't decide to do it at all, is the funny thing. So you hear these stories, often it's a pastor, and they're like, "Yeah, I wrestled with God, and he said, 'You're gonna be a pastor.'" And then they say, "No, I'm not gonna be a pastor, God. That's silly. I don't wanna do that." Well, that was kind of my experience with podcasting. God just one day told me, he's like, "Hey, you're starting a podcast." And I'm like, "No. No, I don't really want to, God. Like, I don't know how to use a microphone. I don't know how to record. I don't know any of the technology. It took me forever to even figure any of that stuff out."
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
and I kept really arguing with him and kind of putting it off, and it was, like, a really nice arguing, like, "Oh god, you're being cute." Like, that's a cute thing to think I'm a podcaster, but no, I'm not gonna do that. And so then I went to, National Religious Broadcasters in Nashville last spring and last, March, and I find myself sitting in a podcast conference, and I'm like, only getting more overwhelmed because they're
Mm.
talking about stuff that is so far over my head that I haven't even thought about. Just, oh my goodness, how am I going to monetize this? And who's streaming it? And what does that even mean to stream it? And all these things. And so I am even more overwhelmed by this whole idea. And it's just that fleshly fear that's creeping in. That's really just my flesh and not listening to what's true with the Lord is that he equips the called, and he doesn't call the equipped, equips the called.
I love
And
that. Yes, I love that quote.
all of those real spiritual truths I was ignoring. I was only listening to my feelings and my fleshly fears and my abilities, which none of that helped me. And finally, um, the Lord just, like, slapped. I feel like all of my big decisions, God has just had to, like, stick things right in front of my nose. And so he put specifically a couple people literally in my own neighborhood in walking distance that were podcasters, that helped podcasters, that encouraged podcasters, that helped them with their technology. Like, it was amazing, and I knew this gentleman as my neighbor and had no idea that's what he did, because he's quiet. You would never ever think he does that for a living. And so the Lord has just been really awesome at helping me, and that as soon as I knew I had someone that, like, tangibly someone that could help me with some of
Mhm.
those things, then it just took off. And so my heart really with podcasting, because I didn't even know what God wanted me to do with that. When he told me to start a podcast, I'm like, well, what am I going to talk about? I didn't have a vision for that, but God slowly revealed it to me. Like, I want you to talk to the parents. I want you specifically to talk to mothers on how to
Mhm.
equip kids, how to equip a parent to raise kids in today's culture, because it's
Mhm.
it's sideways, and we need resources, and we need to feel like we have a community. And just like I didn't feel like I could podcast without someone helping me and coming alongside of me and equipping me, I think many parents feel like they can't parent, and they give up, or they just stop trying their hardest because they feel alone or ill equipped, or they don't have what it takes. And so why try if I'm just going to fail?
Mhm.
And you see that all the time. Parents just, send their kids out to all these things and fill their schedule with, they've got all right after school, they go to five other extracurricular events, and the parents basically tuck them in and give them dinner. And that's all they do as a parent. And there's such a giant responsibility that we have that's way bigger than just a roof over their head.
Mhm. Amen. I don't think parents, in the busyness of life, I get it, but I don't think they completely grasp, I don't know as though I did when my kids were younger, how much influence they, are under from everyone but them.
Yeah.
Because school, 8 hours a day or however many, and then whatever extracurricular activities or friends' houses or, sleepovers, whatever. And the only thing that there's time for is to, quick eat your dinner and go to bed, get ready for
Hmm.
bed. That's not good. That's
Hmm.
just not good. And as the saying goes, you can't give your kids what you don't have either.
Hmm.
So yes, I mean, thank goodness for people like you and podcasts like yours that are there to equip the parents so they can help their kids. Because I don't know about you, Hannah, but with me, for some of the books, the ebooks I've done, I'm thinking to myself as I'm writing them, like, I can't believe I'm having to write this for children,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And I'm like, they're too young to hear about this, but
Mhm.
they're hearing about it, unfortunately, and they're
Yeah.
hearing about it from the other side, from the secular worldview, and so it's like you have to
Mhm.
teach the parents to teach their kids about these things, even, which is why we're gentle, I'm very gentle about the subjects in the book because, again, they're little kids, they're young kids,
Right,
and
right.
this shouldn't be, but unfortunately, it is the world which we live in, so
Yeah.
but yeah, I think your podcast is doing wonderful. You just finished season 1,
Mhm.
and I know you've got some exciting things coming up in season 2. You had hinted at that actually when, I was on your podcast last
Mm,
month or whenever it was.
mhm.
Do you wanna share any little goodies?
So I'm having the CEO from, Brave Books, which I love what they're doing. If you haven't heard of Brave Books, check them out. They're incredible. Kirk Cameron's kind of the spokesperson, for them and goes around the country doing, yeah, story time or story hours at libraries, and I'm so excited. We don't have a date yet, but I'm so excited to have the CEO on. And he used to be an eye doctor, an eye surgeon. And, he says he used to help people see better, see the world around him better. And he quit that to create Brave Books to help our children see the truth in the world better. So it's just a really cool perspective.
Mm, wonderful.
And then I'm also having my brother Lucas Miles on. I'm actually interviewing him this week.
Good for
So that
you.
will be
Good.
incredible.
Yeah, I'm hoping I can get a hold of him when things settle down in his life. If they
Mhm.
do, I can tell on social media he's just like everywhere. I thought I'll give it some time and then
Yeah.
approach him at some point and say, "Okay, have things settled down a little bit?" Yeah, his book is amazing and it's equipping me in my own walk here in my own ministry here and refuting a book that I'm working on refuting right now by someone who has a very large platform.
Mhm.
And so, his book came just the right time. Talk about God's perfect timing.
Mhm.
And it's funny, you're just I'll throw this in here. I don't know if you're like this, and it's just probably me being silly, but you're talking about starting up a podcast by yourself, and because you hear all the time celebrities and, actors, actresses, whatever, "Oh, yeah, I've got a podcast," right? Everybody
Mhm.
has a podcast now, right?
Mhm.
It's true too. "Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, I started a podcast." Instantly, of course, everybody's flocking to their podcast. I get irritated kind of. It's like, "Seriously? Of course you have a podcast."
Yeah.
I said to my husband, I said, "I wanna see them trying it all by themselves from the ground up, you and you alone, not knowing
Mhm.
a thing about anything and having to go from, like you said, to editing,
Huh.
digital audio workstations, microphones, sound,
Well, I mean,
promotion, editing,
editing.
everything by yourself,
Mhm.
and then
Mhm.
come talk to me," because it's like they've got the money, they've got the resources, they hire people to do all those other things for them. Not everyone has that option, and I'm grateful. I say I was alone, but I mean, of course, I know God was with me, is with me, and I
Mhm.
have a lot to thank the Christian podcast community
Mhm.
for taking me on board. But yeah, I get so frustrated when I hear about another
Mhm.
celebrity saying how they have a podcast.
I feel that way with children's books too. I mean, every celebrity now has a children's book out, and you're just
Mm.
like, "Come on, did you really ever want?" I mean, like, that's been my dream since I was 14. Did you really ever want a children's book, or was that, just, "Hey, you're gonna do a children's book. This is what it's gonna be about, and your name's gonna be on it." Okay, okay, cool.
Right, people buy it just because
Yeah.
not necessarily the content, but because of your name.
Right, right.
And
Yep.
that's what I mean, in some of these podcasts, the subjects that they're about, I'm thinking, "Really?
Mhm.
Really? Like, you're a hit with that as a subject?" I'm thinking it doesn't not all of them are like this, but there's a lot of them. When I hear what they talk about, it's like, what lasting value does this
Yeah,
provide
yeah,
to a hurting, broken world? That's what I wanna know, but whatever. It's just
yeah. Gotta be life-giving. I mean, so many of
yes.
them are just kind of your self-help or, in a TED Talk kind of inspiring situation, but, um, if
Exactly,
it's void
exactly.
of if it's void of Jesus, and it's void of everything.
Mhm. And I love what you say in your podcast description. I meant to read this and I'm going to throw it in here. You
Mm,
say this: Our children are being chased by the world, and it is our job to be well equipped and know how to not only lead our flock, but successfully send our arrows out into the world one day to build the kingdom. I
mm,
love that.
thank
That stuck with me when I had first read that. So yes, season 2 is coming up. It sounds like you've
you.
got just between Lucas Miles and the CEO of Brave Books. If you're listening, Candles, please don't miss these episodes. Treehouse
Mhm.
Storyteller podcast. Is there anything else you have in the works here that you'd like to share?
Let's see. Well, I I love I mean, if you once you get to know me, you realize I do a lot of analogies and, a lot of my Instagram
Mhm.
stuff. I actually laughed when you responded to my writings that way because I have been laying out a devotional, actively doing that. So it's slow, but I am digging back through there. I mean, there's so many years of simple posts and writing and blog posts and things like that that I'm trying to compile and organize. And when you don't think of that on the front end, it's a big job trying to shuffle back through and find things that you've written. And so I'm at
True.
least trying to do that and get it organized. And I'm kind of on I was on the fence about it. I initially um I think it might end up being 2 projects, but at first, my heart was, "Oh my goodness, I need to write a teen or like a preteen, early teen devotional." And as I started writing it, I realized that the way that I write and from my podcast experience that my voice and so like my listener is really geared towards more of the mom listening and
Mm.
less towards the teen or the child. And so now I'm starting to shift it and think, okay, how can this become, and I would love to hear if there's one of these out there, but I haven't seen one. And devotionals I know are getting less and less frequent, at coming out. But, a lot of I just sat in on a thing about this, but a little blurb is a lot of devotionals are now coming out by publishing companies themselves, so they're doing them in-house instead of
Mm.
authors writing them, which I found that kind of crazy. So, anyway, but that's just statistically where things are at. So, I started to really lay this out with the mindset of the same thing with my podcast of telling, a devotional story, bringing, just your typical layout of a devotional, but having it really be to the voice of the mother, specifically of how you can now retell this story in conversation with your kids. And,
Mm.
maybe she's reading it in the morning and then they can talk about it over breakfast. And I think it's hard to get that age group to sit down and do a study with you. I mean, you've got to
Yes.
pin them down and it's worth the effort. You have to try to do that. But I
Mhm.
think it also would be easy for, the mother to be fed spiritually. And then maybe
Mhm.
in the car on their way somewhere, now she can bring up something she read about that morning and now let's talk about it. And it's something that it's applying to a situation or really today's culture for her kids. Like they can
Mm.
see it from their lens. And so that's I know it's kind of like a roundabout thing where it's really a devotional that's hitting the hearts of youth, but through their parent, if that makes
Yes.
sense.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, because I had started one, and I have, like, maybe 5 people that I've asked so far, but it was a
Mhm.
collaborative devotional for, like, tweens.
Oh, yeah.
Um, you get a bunch of different because everyone always brings a different perspective in and
Yeah.
different styles of writing for parents to read with their tweens that don't directly, well, maybe directly or indirectly broach the topics that we know are causing problems in
Yes.
the form
Yeah.
of a devotional, and it's a segue to bring up the topic through the
Yeah.
devotional,
Yeah.
and then in the book have the additional resources for them to further dig into it with their children because and
Yeah.
you when you were just saying, and I never thought about this, but you're right, to pin them down to do this. Maybe parents need to simplify their kids' lives a little bit.
Mhm.
Stop signing them up for so many things. And I'm not saying
Yeah.
sports and extracurricular things are bad. Of course they're
Mhm.
not. But they certainly do overtake our lives.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a good point you had about pinning them down to be able to do that. I think that's the huge one of the major stumbling blocks for parents and families is the time factor.
Mhm. Mhm.
So,
Yeah, we made a decision really early on to not do sports because up here, one, they start and it's not that we will not ever do sports. It wasn't That's too big of a statement. But the ones that our kids would have done that were available to us where we are, they were every weekend through the summer into the fall or starting in the spring and every single weekend. And with practices during the week. And for us, we're like, man, that's family time. And isn't that, I mean, a lot of times they're on Sunday mornings. So that, I mean, football is like Sunday morning. So, okay, we're just
mhm,
not taking our kids to church all summer so they can play football or whatever it is. And so to us, it was setting that priority. My husband loves football. Like
mhm,
he would have been the coach. I mean, he would have been that dad on the field with our son doing the thing every weekend, and we just had to, kind of set that boundary early on that no, we're going to do this instead,
mhm,
and specifically choose activities that aren't getting in the way of, that really giant bulk of time that we can go camping or unplug together or, be going on a hike together and talking. And, I think a lot of what I see, and please hear my heart on this because I don't think this is everybody, and I have close friends that do this well. But what I see a lot is the kids going to the practices or the event themselves, and the the parents are really just there as like a social event for themselves.
hmm,
And it has very little to do
mhm.
with the kid. And so I have seen that where it really is just, that's their community. And I think that can be a beautiful thing. But I also think it can be, really a distraction from time that the kids are probably really craving to have mom and dad's attention. And they're now trying to achieve their attention by doing well on the field, in this work-based concept. So, I mean, I'm going deep into it here, but, like, there's a lot of layers that you just
Hmm.
have to be mindful of, and it's not evil in and of itself, like you said, like, there's nothing wrong with it, but just if that's what you're doing, then you still have to have the intentional time elsewhere outside of that.
Yes, you gotta get it from somewhere. You have to take it from somewhere. Absolutely. Absolutely. It's not easy to be a parent. It never was, and I feel like this is one of the worst day and ages to try to be a parent, in
Mm,
all honesty. There's, like you
mhm,
said, distractions not that long
mhm.
ago, and we were just talking in this episode here, there's too many distractions out there.
Yeah.
Social media, I didn't have all that nonsense when I was raising my kids,
Mhm.
but my kids have it. The cell phones and one of my daughters, she's got the thing on her wrist now, and I'm
Mhm.
thinking, "Yeah, that's the last thing you need." Any of us, I mean, really, to have that close access to it, I just don't think it's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just navigating these waters for
Yep.
sure. It's difficult, and,
Yeah, and
we
something I
need to
ask
pray for one
myself.
another.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I was gonna say quickly, something I ask myself a lot is, okay, maybe this was initially intended for good. It's totally like, think of social media. Like, its original at the very, very core idea of it was to bring it was college kids, bring college kids together. It was for a tool purpose for college campuses. The original Facebook was intended for good, and we've taken it as a society and just trashed it.
Yeah.
But I mean, you can look at the core of these things going, okay, this is a great idea. The Fitbit was, for keeping people active at the core of that concept. Like, that's great. But it's what we have now allowed it to be used for, and something that, the enemy's always going to try and take whatever it is and turn it for evil.
Mhm.
And the Lord is always going to try and make something good out of it. So we just have to intentionally ask ourselves, okay, Are we letting our kids do this for his intention, his glorification, or is this kind of sending us down the wrong way? And that's kind of like every choice we make, we have to, choose that like good and evil battle, like whether we are, really like your candle. I mean, are we letting our light shine for the maker, or are we worshiping something of this earth? Like it's just every decision we make, and without getting overwhelmed with thinking that, but it's some of those big things. Okay, is my kid going to use this for bad? If I give them an iPad and I'm not paying attention to them, is it going to be used for good, or is it going to be used against them? Like I mean, it's just common sense a lot of times, but our society doesn't always have common sense.
No,
Uh,
kind of went out the window there, I
that's a
think, in a
whole
lot of
nother podcast
ways.
episode.
Yeah, it is. It is. So, where can people find you, Hannah? How can they get in contact with you?
Yeah, they can find me on the treehousestoryteller.com. The is very important in there. You can find me on Facebook or Instagram with the handle Tree Storyteller. And I also have my photography website, which is just my name, hannahpierrou.com. So tons of fun ways to connect. I'd love to hear from you guys. I love relationship. I'm a very relational person. I love meeting people. I love hearing stories and connecting people together. So feel free to reach out.
Yes, please, guys, reach out to her. Check the podcast out. It's wonderful. And of course, buy her book, Farm to Film, and keep an eye out for her book about the rainbow,
Hmm.
Reclaiming the Rainbow as well. So, as you know, Hannah, I always end my episodes by encouraging my listeners to be that light in the darkness, to be that one little candle. I was hoping that for today's episode, you would grant me the honor of encouraging our listeners in how they can be that light in the darkness, given what you and I have talked about today.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I'll finish with a really quick story. I love farm analogies. I am a sucker for anything like that. And this was just this morning. We had a bear, well, we call it a bear horn. It's just an air horn that someone set off in our neighborhood, which basically tells everybody, hey, there's a bear, as they're also trying to scare the bear away.
Ah.
And my kids were all outside, and so I come running outside and I go, "Okay, everybody, lock the fences, come inside until it passes by." And it was such a reminder to me in that moment that you think that everything is just peachy keen and everything is fine, and there are always, the wolves trying to attack the sheep. And I think being a light in the darkness, one of the ways that I feel like us as parents, or leaders in a community or at our workplace can be a light is just constantly being mindful and aware of protecting the rest of the flock, and
Mm.
just bringing everybody together. And we love doing that in our community of just we have just the most amazing place that we live, with amazing neighbors, and we have so many believers just up and down the mountain roads up here that we have just kind of band together to protect each other. And I think it's important that we surround ourselves with like-minded people, that we can notice when something is maybe at harm, just like our neighbor blew the horn to give us all that, sound that alarm to protect
Yeah.
us. And so I think it's a twofold. We've got to be that light in the darkness, but we have to be a protector as well.
Hannah, that was awesome. Thank you. Absolutely. I like that. Thank you very much. Yes, being there for one another, sounding the alarm.
Mhm.
Yeah, we rely on each other, right? This isn't as Christians, we're not called to walk this alone.
Mhm.
Nor
Yeah.
nor are we as parents or in any way, shape, or form called to walk this journey of life alone. We need each other. And yes, we need like-minded people. Absolutely.
Mhm. Mhm.
To hold each other up and encourage. We need a lot of encouragement. This world can be very discouraging. So thank you for that, Hannah. I really appreciate it. I appreciate you coming on here, taking the time out of your busy schedule to visit me here at One Little Candle.
Rebecca, thank you so much for having me. I look forward to I know we'll meet again either in the treehouse or with with our candles. So thank you so much.
You're very welcome, Hannah. I will talk to you soon.
Awesome.
All right, bye.
Bye-bye.
I really hope, guys, that you enjoyed this as much as I did. Yes, please check out her podcast, not Treehouse Storyteller, as she said, the's very important, the Treehouse Storyteller, and follow her on Instagram as well. And of course, don't forget about her book, From Farm to Film, and keep an eye out also for her book about reclaiming the rainbow. I haven't read the book about the rainbow yet, but I am very much looking forward to doing so. And so next week, I'm going to have a co-host with me, a very special co-host, and he will be co-hosting with me once a month in a slightly different format. It's still One Little Candle, but this is going to be a slightly different format. And so I'll wait till you come back next week for you to hear about it. I'll tell you about it in next week's episode. And after that is coming up my refuting of the book Soul Boom, Why We Need a Spiritual Revolution by Rainn Wilson. So I think that's going to be a great few episodes. I really want you to tune in for that as well, because so much to learn there. There really is, and it's very sad, I guess you could say, the thinking in our world. And I think this will really give you a window into, well, the problems that we have. You know, the book is someone trying to solve the problems we have, but without the proper worldview. And this person has a very large platform, and so I really thought it was worth it to take the time to refute what the author is saying in this book and offer a much, much better way, a much, much better hope. So please come back for that as well. All right, my fellow candles, until next time, you take care and God bless. If you have been enjoying the content of One Little Candle podcast, I would like to encourage you to head over to my website and subscribe. Not only will this allow you to stay up to date with the latest episodes, but it will also give you access to additional resources, links to helpful ministries, and much, much more. By subscribing, you will also be supporting the podcast and helping me to continue bringing important conversations to listeners. So visit my website now at onelittlecandlepodcast.com and click on the subscribe button to join the community. Thank you for listening to One Little Candle Podcast.